2 months late, 2 pages, no, 6 pages, I guess, of absolute nothing. I mean, it was basically a report that said, well, yeah, but we got Orion and Aries, and we're moving forward on those. There was nothing about what the gap meant, what it might mean to the country. So, we were left with, to our own devices again, to come up with what we think the impact of that may be. And you heard about it this morning. You heard about the consequences of the U.S. not just, I think Frank used the term, not just not pausing, or not stepping back, but even pausing. We're going to be outpaced. And not too long ago, I saw a video that was basically, I was told it was done by the Chinese Space Agency, and it sort of was a capsulization of their future plans. And at one point, there was a video clip, just sort of sandwiched in there. They were talking about their station plans and their lunar plans, and that clip was an Apollo video of Apollo, one of the landers, and an American flag, and the American flag had been replaced by the Chinese flag in that video, and that really said it to me, and because I've jokingly said one of the things we really need to spur activity around here is to have the Chinese come back and bring us those flags back and say, here, these aren't needed anymore. That might get our attention. That's the 5-year, that you were talking about, when suddenly we're not there and we wonder why. So we have the risk of that because we had a policy that was based on budget. We didn't have a budget based on policy for the last 8 years. We have a policy that is the consequences of a budget, and that is insanity. Now, what did we try to do about that? Look at the bills. You go back and look at the bills. We fully funded Constellation, Aries, Orion. We fully funded everything necessary to keep moving forward to accelerate those dates to narrow that gap. But it didn't get requested, and if it doesn't get requested, it doesn't go into the Budget Act. If it's not in the Budget Act, it doesn't, or budget resolution, it doesn't end up in the allocation of the appropriators, and so they can't appropriate it. Even if they wanted to, they don't have it within their piece of the pie. So it starts back at the administration, and that's why this review is so crucial. This review has to reset that paradigm and establish a policy and a consensus that we can look at, and then find what resources we need to address. That's why in our hearing 2 weeks ago, it was very strongly encouraged and urged that the limitation implicit in the charter of the Augustine panel to keep all recommendations within the projected budget in the out years was encouraged to be ignored. And in fact, I kind of think it's actually a violation of FACA to even write it that way, because it prejudges the outcome and influences what you may consider. And we've been assured that would, by Norm Augustine and others, that Norm is Norm, and he's not going to be afraid to offer anything that breaks that budget number if he thinks it makes sense. So we're hopeful that'll be the case. And so, it's going to be essential that at least that the range of options are not limited by the budget, because then we're still doing the same thing. We're letting budget determine policy. And that is not how we became those leaders in space exploration. It is not how we will remain leaders in space exploration. I mean, that's a fundamental point. We got to get away from sand chart policy. And that sand chart was the worst thing that ever came along. And we've always known it made no sense to come up with one system and drop off and then ramp up to another one. In the meantime, and that brings up the next point on destination, we are using that initial system to finish, finally, a station that we have invested $100 billion in, depending on how you add up the numbers. Our partners have added another $30 billion if you add everything all together. And we finally cut the ribbon on it, and the next day can't get there, except by hitchhiking, as Mike suggested, and by paying them $51 million a seat for the Russians to fly us up there, and our partners, because we forget we're obligated to get the Japanese, the Canadians, and the Europeans up there. We signed a deal that said we'd get them there too, not just our astronauts, but theirs too. And so we will have abrogated the responsibility if we don't do that, so we have to do it. We still have to pay for the ability to get 3 crew members down on an emergency basis, so we got to pay for that twice a year as well for 3 seats. So, you know, it's the kind of thing that people are going to say, how did we get to this point? And we've been carping at it for years, and obviously we're ineffective because here we are. We have that problem. But now we have an opportunity to resolve it, I believe, at least in part. And we have to take advantage of that. And we have to do it collectively. You know, and people keep saying, you know, that you know, we need to work together, and it's really true. And we proved that it works. You know, we had a $1 billion request for reimbursement to NASA for costs associated with returning the shuttle to flight. And nobody believed we'd get anywhere with that. And we got the industry all together in a room, and we got them to all agree that you know, all boats rise when the tide rises. And everybody's got to forget their individual purpose and come together, and they did, and we got $1 billion, and we passed it in the Senate by unanimous consent. $1 billion add-on plus up to NASA's budget 2 years ago, or a year ago. And we lost it in conference. Why? Because the administration told the House, you got to cut $20 billion, and yeah, go ahead and take that $1 billion out of NASA, because they didn't ask for it in the first place. You know, so. But the point is, we succeeded in getting it to that level. So people talk about there's no new money for NASA. I don't believe that, and I refuse to accept it. That's the OMB Kool-Aid that we've all been drinking for 5 to 8 years, and we got to stop. And someone raised the question in the last session about, look, why don't we start talking about NASA being part of the economic recovery? You know, we need to bail in for NASA. You know, NASA will bail out the country if we let it. Because where have you had a government activity that has returned more to the economy than it's spent, other than NASA? And you've seen the numbers, $7 to $9 for every dollar invested. And people talk about those, well, it depends on your assumptions, and they minimize it. Well, I'll take $1 back for every dollar invested, you know, and it's going to be better than anybody else in government. And here we have an opportunity with COTS and programs like this in this new paradigm to do that sort of, to see that kind of return on investment. And that's what we need to show, is not only is it in the obvious case where we're getting matching money, but in a less obvious case where we've created industries and the economic vitality of this country over 50 years has been and had at the core the kind of work that NASA does and spins off into the private sector. I mean, everybody in this room knows that. Why doesn't the American public know that? And that's our job. We need to do a better job of making that connection, because it is in the nation's economic interest to invest more in space. And that is provable, demonstrable, and needs to be said over and over again. And if we just say we got to fit within the out-year budgets, we're surrendering the high ground that we really own as a result of NASA's history. The destination issue of 2015 or what for space station is the second point I'll really quickly comment on. I'm sorry, guys, I'm taking all your free time. We were kind of surprised. We thought we'd passed a law that told NASA to go off and plan to use, first of all, we said, NASA, don't take any step that would preclude the use of space station beyond 2015 for at least 5 years. That's 2020, by the way. 15, 20, I can do that. Then we said, they'll come back to us by July 15th of the next year, is the way it works out in terms of time, and give us a plan of how you would do that, how you would operate and utilize space station to the maximum amount through at least 2020. And then for the first time we get this budget, and for the first time that budget has in it an indication that this has been their plan all along to deorbit the damn thing in 2015. They have never until this year told us that, and they have always told us the opposite. And if I sound upset about that, I am. And it's not acceptable. And I'll tell you, I won't say who it was, but I sat in a meeting recently with a senator, a senior senator, and a couple of nominees for positions at NASA.